Nobody expected a Nintendo franchise to double as a graveyard, but here we are. The Pokédex has been hiding witness testimony from actual tragedies for over 25 years. Dead mothers, frozen hikers turned into decorations, spirits of abandoned kids screaming from tree stumps, and the crazy part is, it's all canon, officially printed in the games. Now, cross-reference those entries with real-world forensics and folklore, and the verdicts land hard. 5 case files, 5 confirmed horrors, and what you thought was imagination, turns out it's documentation. But before we get into it, remember to like, subscribe, and hit that bell. Let's start with the one that'll ruin your next museum trip, the Yamask. That floating little ghost carrying a weird golden mask around like it's some kind of trophy. Cute, right? Wrong. Dead wrong. See, the official Pokédex entry, printed in black and white, sun and moon, and scarlet and violet, says these Pokemon arose from the spirits of people buried in graves. That alone should stop you cold, but it gets worse. Each one carries a mask that used to be its face when it was human. Sometimes, they look at it and cry. Read that again. A Pokemon is literally carrying around its own dead face, sobbing over it. What most people don't realize is that this is not folklore. It's not a loose theory from some corner of the internet. It's printed, official, canon across multiple generations of games. The developers wrote it down, signed off on it, and shipped it to kids worldwide. Now here's where the drama gets even heavier. Cross-reference Yamask against real-world history, and the horror multiplies. Ancient Egyptian funerary practices created realistic death masks, wax and plaster casts taken directly from the deceased person's face, pressed it right onto the skin to preserve their identity for the afterlife. Romans did the same. So did several indigenous cultures across the globe. The goal was always the same: keep the dead recognizable forever. And that's putting it lightly. Forensic anthropology today still uses facial reconstruction techniques pulled from skulls found at crime scenes and archaeological digs. Investigators literally rebuild faces of the long dead to identify them. Sound familiar? In extreme preservation cases, permafrost and bog conditions have kept human faces intact for over 5,000 years. Otzi the Iceman, the Talon Man, Siberian mummies, all of them still carry a perfect mask of who they were. So what is Yamask really? The Pokédex says it's the spirit of a dead person still clinging to the face it used to wear in real life. And real-world history confirms humans have been literally making and preserving death masks for thousands of years. The theory isn't a reach, it's documented fact wrapped in a Pokemon sprite. And here's the key detail. One of the most overlooked entries describe the Yamask occasionally becoming overwhelmed with grief when it remembers its human life. Overwhelmed with grief. In a kid's game. Many are not seeing the truth here. Game Freak didn't just hint at this. They spelled it out. Yamask remembers being alive. Remembers dying. Remembers its own face. Now it floats around an empty world clutching the only proof it ever existed. Verdict? The horror is completely real. Theory confirmed by the Pokédex itself. But if a ghost carrying its own dead face is already this disturbing, wait until you hear what's frozen solid on a mountain. Moving up the mountain from the grave, the next witness statement comes soaked in ice, and what's waiting inside that cave will flip your stomach. Frostlass. Ice and ghost type. Elegant, graceful. Looks like a floating kimono ghost. Beautiful actually, and absolutely terrifying once you read her file. The Pokédex entry, found across Diamond and Pearl, Sun and Moon, and Scarlet and Violet, lays it out plain. Legends in snowy regions say that a woman who was lost on a snowy mountain was reborn as this Pokemon. Her breath drops to -58 degrees Fahrenheit. She freezes prey solid and displays them as decorations in her secret lair. Let that sink in. A frozen gallery. A hidden lair full of frozen victims arranged like ornaments. For starters, that temperature figure is no accident. -58 degrees Fahrenheit is colder than most Antarctic winters. It's the kind of cold that flash freezes tissue before ice crystals have time to rupture cells. In real cryobiology, that's the sweet spot for perfect preservation. Scientists use similar temperatures for cryonics labs today. The developers didn't pick a random number. They picked the exact threshold where a body would freeze intact like a statue. And get this, real-world history backs up the horror completely. Otzi the Iceman, discovered in the Alps, was frozen for over 5,300 years with his skin, tattoos, and stomach contents still intact. Mammoths pulled from the Siberian permafrost still have fur, muscle, and eyelashes. Hikers who vanished on mountains in the 1950s have been found decades later, perfectly preserved, looking like they fell asleep yesterday. Mountains are natural freezers, and they keep their dead. Nobody expected this to happen in a Pokemon game, but Frostlass's backstory lines up with documented mountain tragedies across every continent. But here's the catch. And this is where it gets darker. The Pokédex specifies she takes her prey and arranges the frozen bodies like decorations. It's not predator behavior, that's ritual behavior. In nature, spider wasps paralyze prey and store them alive as fresh food, but they don't display their victims. That's a human trait. Trophy keeping is something that shows up in only a handful of documented real-world cases, all of them extremely disturbing to investigators. What Frostlass does isn't hunting, it's collecting, and the Pokédex says she's doing it because she remembers being a lost woman on that mountain, a woman who froze to death alone, and now she's making sure no one else leaves. A lot of people are confused about whether Pokemon stories can actually be this dark. They can. They are. Verdict? The horror is 100% real. Frostlass is the reborn spirit of a woman who died in the snow, and she's still up there, collecting new residents for her frozen exhibit. From a mountain full of frozen trophies, the trail leads somewhere cozier, a kid's bedroom, which somehow turns out to be the scariest location on this list. Banette, pure ghost type, looks like a raggedy zipper-mouthed plush doll with pins stuck in it. You probably thought it was just a cool edgy design. It's not. It's canon, and it's personal. The official Pokédex entries across Ruby and Sapphire, Sun, Moon, and Scarlet and Violet describe Banette this way. An abandoned plush doll came to life from a grudge. It seeks the child who discarded it to exact revenge. The entry goes further in some versions, saying the doll developed its own power from the intensity of the pain and hatred it felt after being thrown away. So here's the deal. Banette isn't a creature, it's a grudge with a body. What makes this one hit different is that it targets children specifically. Not monsters, not bad guys, just the kid who owned it. The Pokédex says Banette hunts. It searches. It doesn't forget the address of the home where it got left behind. Basically, every kid who ever threw out a stuffed animal just got put on a list. Now let's cross-reference this with the real world. Psychology has a whole field dedicated to transitional objects, which is the fancy term for the stuffed animals and dolls kids get attached to in early childhood. These objects carry emotional weight far beyond their fabric and thread. In extreme cases, losing or discarding one can cause real psychological distress well into adulthood. Many are not seeing the truth here. The attachment is real science. And then, there's folklore. The haunted doll concept isn't a Pokemon invention. It's a global horror archetype. Annabelle in New England, Robert the Doll down in Key West, Japanese Ichimatsu dolls with legends of growing hair, every culture has a version. The idea that discarded, abused, or forgotten objects carry residual energy is one of the oldest fears in human history. And here's the wild part that most people miss. Some Pokédex entries specify that Banette's design shows pins stuck through its body, and the pins are where curses are stored. Pin-filled dolls used as curse conduits is a real practice that shows up in multiple documented folk traditions worldwide, mostly famous in parts of the Caribbean and Louisiana, though the real-world use is far more spiritual than Hollywood versions make it look. There are still many rumors on the air about what Banette really represents, but what many can confirm is that the Pokédex flat out says it was once a child's toy, discarded, and is now hunting that child down. Verdict: horror confirmed. Banette is exactly what the entry claims, a vengeful spirit born from heartbreak, now wandering toward a specific kid's front door. If a doll coming back for revenge wasn't enough to keep you up at night, the next case hides in the trees you walk past 1,000 times. Phantump, ghost and grass type. Looks like a small tree stump with eyes peeking out. Seems harmless, maybe even sad. It's sad, yes. It's also a spirit of a dead child. The Pokédex entry from X and Y, repeated and expanded in Sun and Moon and Scarlet and Violet, reads this way. These Pokemon are stumps possessed by the spirits of children who get lost in the forest and never made it home. Their cries sound like eerie screams that echo through the woods, luring in anyone who hears them. The crazy part is, the entry specifies that the cries are meant to attract other people. Adults usually, search parties, other children, and those who follow the cries deeper into the forest, the Pokédex hints, don't always come back. One regional variant of the entry states that Phantump uses its voice to lead travelers away from safe paths. So what most people don't realize is that Phantump is not just a sad ghost, it's bait. Let's cross-reference. Real-world missing children statistics are grim. Forest environments rank among the highest risk terrains in search and rescue reports worldwide. Dense woodland disorients people within hours. Temperature drops fast. Young children can wander less than half a mile before becoming completely lost, and in some documented cases, rescue teams have searched for days only to find remains years later. Japanese folklore has an entire catalog of yokai built around this exact phenomenon. The concept of kodama, forest spirits tied to trees, goes back centuries. Lost child spirit legends show up in German Black Forest tales, Appalachian ghost stories, Scottish Highland mythology, and indigenous traditions across the Americas. Every continent has some version of the forest takes children and their voices stay behind. Biologically, here's a detail that lands hard. Tree stumps are hotspots for fungal growth. Fungi literally consume dead organic matter and integrate it into new structures. In a weird, almost poetic sense, a tree stump can reanimate dead tissue as part of its own growth cycle. So the idea of a child's spirit becoming part of a stump isn't just folklore, it echoes real decomposition science. For starters, the Pokédex says these children died, lost, and afraid. Now they scream from the wood. Forever. Hands down, this is one of the most quietly horrifying entries in the entire franchise. Verdict: the horror is completely real. Theory confirmed. And every forest in the Pokemon world is a graveyard with a voice. The last case file circles back to something closer to home. A child still mourning a parent, carrying the weight on its head every single day. Cubone, pure ground type. Tiny little dinosaur looking creature that wears a skull on its head. Adorable in merch, devastating in canon. The Pokédex entry, first printed in red and blue all the way back in the original Kanto games, then repeated in gold and silver in every main series game since, is brutal in its simplicity. Cubone wears the skull of its dead mother on its head. Because of the skull, it never sees its mother's face. It cries echoes sadly in the night. Read that one more time. Every single Cubone is a grieving child wearing its dead mom's skull, for its entire life. And get this, the Pokédex specifies that the cries echo sadly at night. Not during play, not during training. At night. When every child is supposed to feel safe, Cubone is crying out for a parent who will never answer. What makes this even worse is the detail that it never sees its mother's face. The skull covers its eyes at an angle that blocks the view upward, meaning the child literally spends its whole existence one layer of bone away from the face it can't stop missing. That's not a design quirk. The Pokédex spells it out on purpose. Cross-reference with the real world and the weight doubles. Elephants are famous for carrying the bones of deceased family members and revisiting the remains years after the death. Primates like chimpanzees have been observed holding and grooming deceased infants for days, sometimes weeks. Corvids, those are crows and ravens, hold what researchers call funerals, gathering around dead members of their own kind. Mourning in the animal kingdom is documented, real, and widespread. Forensic anthropology has records of human cultures wearing skulls of ancestors as protection, as honor, or as part of mourning rituals. Certain historical funerary traditions specifically involve keeping pieces of the deceased close to the body of the living as a way to preserve the bond. But here's where it hits hardest. Attachment theory, one of the most studied fields in modern psychology, shows that early parental loss is one of the most damaging traumas a developing mind can experience. It shapes every relationship afterward, every single one. And Cubone, according to the Pokédex, lives that loss every second of its life. No closure, no face, no release. It's not a monster design, it's a child who refuses to let go. Verdict: horror confirmed. Every Cubone you ever caught, every Cubone in every game ever released, was a mourning orphan carrying the skull of its mother, and the developers had never walked it back. Now, here's where we have to stop and talk to you directly, the person watching this, because it's fair to wonder, can all of this really be real? Did the most beloved kids franchise on Earth actually embed this much grief into its encyclopedia? Are we missing a key detail that would soften all this? Some hidden footnote that says it's all a metaphor? The thing is, no. Every single entry quoted here is pulled from the official Pokédex printed in the games themselves. These aren't creepypastas. These aren't fan theories stitched together on forums. They are the developers' own words, shipped to millions of kids across the world, generation after generation. Yamask carries its own face, Frostlass freezes trophies, Banette is hunting, Phantump is bait, Cubone is grieving, all canon, all documented. And when cross-referenced with real forensic anthropology, real psychology, real folklore, and real mountain tragedies, every single theory holds up. The Pokédex isn't hiding horror, it's reporting it. The nightmares aren't overnight additions to the franchise, they've been there since 1996. So the real mystery is this: did the developers know exactly what they were writing, or did the horror slip out on its own? Drop your theories in the comments, smash that like button, and subscribe for more buried truths hiding inside your favorite franchises.